Good afternoon, everybody. My day just has started, so I'm impressed by the number, as Jan Willem said. I'm impressed by the number of participants today because it's really a specific subject. A short introduction of myself and Andres, who will later do the presentation. Since 2017, we opened an agricultural office here in the region. The head office is in Bogota, the embassy, but our working area is Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. I think at this moment, it would be a little bit strange not to go touch upon the situation at this moment in Colombia. So Colombia at this moment, unfortunately, is experiencing some challenges. Of course, this country, like all the other countries, has been in a COVID pandemic since March last year, which has big economic and social effects. And on top of that, we are now also in demonstrations prolonging themselves already into the third week. So challenging, but Colombia is a very resilient country. So we hope that the coming, everything will quiet down, people will get vaccinated, and the economy can pick up again, and that Colombia will show its resilience like it's always have been doing. Why this study? We commissioned the Holland House to do this study on manure valorization as part of our strategy for a circular agriculture. What we did is, when the Ministry of Agriculture in the Netherlands presented their policy on a more circular agriculture in 2018, we developed a bilateral strategy for Colombia in the year 2019 with concrete working agendas. We focus on 6 themes, which is water for agriculture, it's valorization of biomass, reduction of plastic use, and integrated pest management. This mainly in products which connect the Netherlands with Colombia. So palm oil, bananas, coffee, and flowers, which are all important export product of Colombia to the Netherlands. But then we also added 2 areas. First of them is protein transition and valorization of manure in the poultry and pig sector. Not so much because there is an existing trade between the Netherlands and Colombia, but more because of the potential and the ambitions Colombia has in this field. And of course, the technology we as the Netherlands have to offer. So we are working on many areas at this moment. This is one, valorization of manure. And I hope that on the basis of this webinar, we will be able to develop further activities together on the Colombian market. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patricia, for these opening words. Well, basically the agenda for this webinar, we're going to start with the presentation of the study that has been executed. Then we're going to listen to Kersten, who is going to tell us a bit more about his practical experience in Latin America, but also the rest of Latin America. And then we're going to continue with Jeroen Blom of RVO, who's going to tell us a bit more about the instruments RVO could offer to support companies with interest in the Colombian market. Then we have space for Q&A. So please, for all the persons that are listening, that are participating today, the chat is open, the Q&A is open. So please, already when listening to the presentations, start asking your questions. We will try to answer them all during the webinar or afterwards. So please, for everybody, already start to ask your questions while listening to the different speakers. And at the end, after the Q&A, we will also talk a bit about the next actions, because the study but also this whole webinar, it's a starting point. So we want to take concrete action to make the opportunities more concrete for Dutch companies. So we have next steps that we would like to propose to you. But let's go quickly to Andres Santana, Juan Diego Rios. Andres Santana, part of Patricia's team at the embassy. Juan Diego, part of the Holland House Colombia team. They have done the study together, looking at manure valorization in Colombia, at the situation, but also what perspective could that offer for Dutch companies. Juan Diego, Andres, the floor is yours for the presentation of the study.
Okay, thank you very much, Jan-Willem. I want to check if you can hear me well first.
Perfectly.
Okay, so thank you very much. So thank you for the introduction. As Jan-Willem said, my name is Juan Diego Rios, and I have been doing this presentation with Andres Santana, who is also from the Agricultural Department of the Embassy. I am a senior consultant from the Holland House. And well, first of all, again, we want to thank you for your participation in this webinar. Since the last year, we've been working on the development of this research, aiming to identify concrete opportunities in the sector for both Dutch companies and knowledge centers. So while doing so, we have had virtual meetings with some people who are also here with us in this webinar. So to them, also thank you very much for your support and collaboration in the development of this study. So next slide, Sarah, please. So first, we want to give you our regional context on the manure sector. For doing so, next slide, Sarah. Thank you. So for doing so, we have identified the main producer countries of pork and chicken in Latin America. In the map, you can see the four biggest producers of meat expressed in metric tons, where Brazil, of course, is positioned in the first place, followed by Mexico, Argentina, and Colombia. But also we can see that in general, South America keeps growing in pork meat production from 2018 to 2019, a 4.6% production growth, and a 2.3% growth of chicken meat production for the same years. And if you can see, Colombia, for example, had one of the biggest egg production growth of Latin America between 2017 and 2018. These numbers shows the potential these sectors have in the region, which not only supply local demand where there is a considerable average per capita consumption of chicken and pork products, but also their products are being positioned in international markets, especially in the case of Brazilian and Mexican products. So next slide. So we consider that those numbers and information give us a clear understanding of the amount of poultry imports in the region. And in fact, because of that, there are countries which already have, with some extent, a manure management legislation or laws that aim to control the animal waste produced in these countries, as you can see in the first map in green. However, in the second map, you can see that there are some countries where the level of compliance for this legislation is partial, because it is a legislation that does not control the whole process of manure management, but only fixes in some part of its chain, like the storage of manure, or for example, whether you can use the manure as a fertilizer or not, or penalties on the ways the companies dispose the manure. Or also, you can see in this map that there is not compliance at all of the legislation, as the color purple shows, in most of the cases, because the legislation aims to a specific problematic and during a specific period of time of certain government. So the third map shows the law enforcement level that the legislation has in each country. As we can see, in most of the countries, the law enforcement is weak, or there's just pressure by the government in office to selected farms for them to compliance the legislation, especially in medium and large companies in the sector, as it happens pretty much in our country, the Colombia scenario. But we will go deeper in this point further in the presentation, where we talk about the challenges for the sector in Colombia, especially. So next slide. So now that we show you the regional context to see how is Colombia positioned in comparison with other countries in Latin America, we are going to talk about specifically the Colombia context in the sector. So next. So here, well, according to the Poultry National Association, which is FENAVI, and the Pork National Association, which is Pork Colombia, Colombia has been doing very well regarding production of poultry and pork products. There is, for example, a growth of 10% of pork meat production between 2018 and 2019, chicken meat production, which reached 1.7 million tons in 2018, as you can see, and a record of egg production in 2018. Also, all this linked to a considerable per capita consumption of these products by Colombian population. And now, if we check to the poultry and pork livestock distribution in the country, we can see the departments where the major concentration of these animals are located, and thus regions where the biggest companies of the sector have their farms and production centers in the country. So for 2019, Colombia reached a total peak population of almost 6.5 million animals and a total of 187.4 million poultry, where 126.7 million were broilers and the rest lawyers. And according with our research and our own calculation, in Colombia, approximately more than 22,000 tons of poultry manure are produced daily, while a bit more than 50,000 tons of pig manure are produced per day. So next slide, please. Thank you. So due to the number of animals and waste produced in the country, the Colombian Ministry of Environment has been developing two plans to work sustainably with the poultry and pork manure. The first chart you can see in the slide is the ministry vision on how processing and using manure should be promoted among the country. So the ministry wants to stimulate the development of activities to process manure in the country by using biodigesters or other technologies to take advantage of the different uses of processed manure. But also, it wants to stimulate the use of these final products coming from processed manure, such as, for example, organic fertilizers for agricultural activities. All this through economic instruments like financial support for companies to buy technologies and equipment to process manure, and also tax exemptions on products coming from processed manure. So in order to reach that, we know that the ministry have been thinking about the implementation of two pilot projects subsidized partly by foreign companies expert in the sector, but still they haven't taken steps forward these projects. There is also an NAMA on biogas from 2019, as you can see in the second chart. This NAMA has three main objectives. The first is the reduction of greenhouse gases by using an alternative for natural gas, to valorize the waste generated in farms energetically by producing a biogas or green coal, and to generate rural employment of high quality. Next slide, please. So that gives us actually a general conceptualization of how is Colombia in the sector nowadays. So the next slide, please, Sarah. Shows us the main current and potential uses of manure around the world, which we believe could also be replicated in Colombia. We have identified treatment of manure through processes such as composting, insect breeding to get protein to feed animals, biodigesters to obtain biofertilizers and biogas, and drying processes to obtain other different kinds of products. So next slide. Okay, so to talk about the potential demand for technologies to transform manure in Colombia, I want to give the lead to Andres Santana from the Agricultural Department of the Embassy. So Andres, thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Juan Diego, and good day, everybody, again. Well, in order to better understand the potential for demand of technologies to transform manure in Colombia, first I would like to explain a little bit more about the agricultural sector in this country. Next slide, please. As you may see in the upper chart, 35% of Colombia's soil is suitable for agricultural activities, which is equivalent to around 40 million hectares. This could be also an indicator of the potential demand for fertilizers in the country. And if you take into account that currently only 5 million hectares are being cultivated in the entire country, as presented in the chart on the right corner below, there is much room for cropping, which could be translated also into more demand of fertilizers. Next slide, please. So, well, during 2020, the agricultural sector in Colombia grew almost up to 3%. And in this map, you can appreciate the top 8 departments of the country according to the harvested area. If you recall in the previous slides presented by Juan Diego, this map clearly coincides with the poultry and pork livestock distribution in the country. This means that manure, which could be transformed into organic fertilizer for using them into the, let's call them top agricultural departments, does not need to travel long distances, which might pose a big problem, as we will see later. So even if the number of hectares of the agricultural production does not increase in the country, there might be already some room to substitute chemical fertilizers for organic fertilizers. So backing up these indications we found, we searched for the current demand of fertilizers, and as you can see in this slide, only 1.6 million tons of fertilizers are now used, while the potential demand could reach up to 2.5 million tons. Furthermore, synthetic fertilizer is one of the most important agricultural inputs in the country, as you may see in the right low corner of this slide. Next slide, please. Now, talking about another potential transformation of manure, this time into biogas. In these maps, we see the potential for biogas production out of pork and manure and poultry, sorry, as shown in the first map. And in the second, you can see the poultry distribution map for producing biogas. These numbers are expressed in cubic meters per year, and taking as a reference that 1 ton of crude oil is equal to around 41,000 gigajoules. In the two tables, we see the equivalence of these cubic meters per year into gigajoules per year, which also reflects the high potential for the country in biogas production. Next slide, please. This information I just presented in the previous slide might explain the increasing interest of the Colombian Ministry of Environment in these two alternatives for manure transformation, as you can see in this slide in the first upper part. Besides, by supporting these projects, we know that the Ministry of Environment, after interviewing some of their officials, aims at reducing the carbon footprint by reducing incentives towards deforestation on the one hand, for using timber for cooking or heating or any other daily activities of farmers, for example, while reducing pollution resulting from manure itself. Next slide, please. As explained by Patricia in her welcoming words today, we have structured a bilateral agenda on circular agriculture, in which protein transition for the poultry and pork sector is one of our prioritized focus areas. To a certain extent, we know that manure could be an input to rear insects, such as the black soldier fly, which could replace corn imports for animal feed, for instance. Next slide, please. Now talking about the challenges in Colombia for processing manure. After interviewing different stakeholders, we found the following challenges. Next slide, please. First, existing technologies in the country for manure treatment are very basic, whereas foreign and more advanced technology are perceived as more expensive or not proper for the Colombian farmers' needs. Second, lack of knowledge by agricultural producers who ignore that manure, more than waste, has the potential to be both an input and source of income, it's also an additional challenge in Colombia. Third, fresh manure transportation has limitations given by local law, distances, and infrastructure, which in turns makes this alternative very expensive. And fourth, lack of national regulations specifically aimed at the treatment and production of processed manure, because the focus of the legislation is mainly on solving other problems, as you see in this chart in the lower part. Next slide, please. Fifth, environmental licenses are not easy to comply with in the country, and this is especially true for small farmers, and it entails high costs, both in money and time. Sixth, the dispersion of pork and poultry farms in the Colombian countryside, which are poorly connected, and it also hampers the idea of having central manure processing plants. And seventh, there is a growing new rural population with different standards of living, and it's not used to coexist with livestock farming. And at the same time, the situation is worsened by the absence of land use plans, enabling the possibility of urbanizing previous rural areas, pushing livestock farming to more or even more isolated areas. Next slide, please. So now we move to the opportunities for the Dutch sector, but I leave this silver lining of the story to Juan Diego. So please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andres. And so we continue with the opportunities. And regarding all this information and our research, we identified 5 main opportunities for Dutch companies and non-liceners in Colombia, taking into account also your expertise in the field, not only in the Netherlands, but also in other many countries around the world. So next slide, please. So the first opportunity is the offering of technological and infrastructure solutions for biogas production, also thinking about the potential that Colombia has to produce biogas and the plans of the Ministry of Environment we mentioned before. Another opportunity is the offering of technologies which not only aim to produce biogas from the animal waste, but also other kind of products as fertilizers, animal feed, or green coal as another source of bioenergy. We thought about the silos as a third opportunity, since in Colombia there is a need of storing manure in a way it can conserve its natural nutrients, but also control the odor pollution that it can generate in bad storage conditions. Next slide, please. Also, a manure processing plant at a community level, which is an idea taken from one of our interviews with the Minister of Environment. Due to the amount of small, medium farms which are not technified, there is an opportunity to think about a centralized processing manure plant, which uses the manure waste from these kind of farms, recollecting it and transporting it through special, for example, pipelines till the plant, where the manure could be processed and transformed into products that could benefit a community, such as biogas, electricity, or organic fertilizers for agricultural activities. And a last opportunity identified is knowledge transfer and research centers in Colombia. We do need people in the sector to be educated and informed about the multiple benefits of processing manure. These through, for example, laboratories for sample setting universities, the promotion of the benefits of using the manure for biogas, insect breeding, and animal feed, as animal feeds and organic fertilizers, and so on. And also the implementation of training programs on manure processing. Next slide, please. Also, during our research, we discovered that there are already some projects that have been implemented in Colombia regarding manure valorization, like, as you can see, for Colombia, a NUFIX training program on manures and environmental impact and solutions, 4 training programs implemented by the Colombian Dutch company Ocotec on sustainability and circular agriculture, which include manure management, management of animal manure. Also, you can see a cooperation program between Haas University and Port Colombia to train more than 1,300 students. And as you see in the slide, the two programs below are being implemented by one of the biggest Colombian companies in the sector, where they are using manure of 6,000 sows to produce energy for self-consumption, and manure from 1 million chicken to produce organic fertilizers that are actually commercialized for agricultural production. The company is nowadays still interested in pilot project to produce biochar from pork and poultry manure, but they haven't started with it yet. They're still looking for a partner to start implementing this project. Next slide, please. So now we want to finish with some tips for you as companies and institutions with potentials to enter into the Colombian market for this specific sector. The first one is to offer and give advice on tailor-made solutions and technologies, taking into account not only that not all the farms are big, and there could be medium-sized farms with a bit lower budget for this kind of equipment. Also related with the first tip, is important to think about tailor-made projects that can be implemented at different scales, for example, local or national levels, to bring to Colombia models that some Dutch companies have applied in the Netherlands or other countries in Asia or Africa, and propose them as pilot projects in the country, more specifically to the Ministry of Environment or the associations which want to give a step forwards with these kind of projects. It's also important to study and analyze the possibility of adapting your equipment and technologies to the current Colombian conditions. Participate in different conferences and training programs where you can highlight the Dutch expertise in the sector. Also participate in agricultural events such as FENAVI Congress, which by the way was cancelled for this year due to the pandemic, and we are still waiting for news about a new date. But there is also this huge event called Expo Agrofuturo, which is going to be virtual for the very first time this year, and the first or second week of September. And finally, keep in touch with us, with both the agricultural department of the embassy and the Holland House. We are constantly planning projects such as commercial missions or webinars, which could be an opportunity for you to get closer to potential partners here in Colombia. So next slide. So we just want to show you the people we interviewed and the institutions we interview, and who helped us also a lot in the development of this research. Next slide. So we have private and public entities and Colombian and Dutch entities, as you can see in the chart. So next slide. This is pretty much it. This is the contact information for about the Holland House and the embassy, the Department of Agriculture of the embassy. So thank you again very much for assisting us. And this is it.
Thank you, Juan Diego. Thank you, Andres, for this very clear presentation. I think very well constructed from regional to Colombian context, from challenges to the opportunities you see within this sector in Colombia. There's already some questions. I would propose to try to answer them at the end of this webinar. But in the meanwhile, for other persons that have questions about the technical content of the presentation or about the opportunities or the challenges, please write down your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will try to answer them at the end. I think the presentation was perfect. Indeed, the FENAVI Congress has been postponed. Agrofuturo is still on the agenda. I think it has to be seen if it's going to be completely virtual or in some way presential. I think that's not been decided upon. So we will keep you informed on these big events also in Colombia, because they might be of interest to you. I see, looking at the time, that we are a bit behind schedule, but well, I think we will manage. Let's continue with Hans Kersten. Hans Kersten is sales manager, sales director for Dorset Green Machines. one of the companies experienced in Latin America, successful in, I know, in Chile, working on becoming successful also in Colombia. Hans, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today. And hopefully you can share some of your experiences so far in Colombia with us. We're going to project your presentation.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for the time that you give me that we can tell something from Dorset. I will do a short introduction for myself. Sorry for the backgrounds of sounds because I'm working from home, and of course we are living with more people in the house. Dus there is a possibility that you sometimes have some back sounds what not blows to the meeting. I'm working for Dorset about 12 years now. Here before I'm working for companies that do process lines in the industry. And I'm starting after school to working for racing teams, and especially the teams from Italy, Ferrari and Minardi. And together we bring also Kimi Räikkönen to the World Championship. But the traveling for races was too much, and that is the reason I switched to the industry, and from there I come to Dorset. Dorset is a family company. We make about 1,000 installations from beginning until now all over the world. The most in handling of manure, and the last 2 years still more sludge from water treatments. Can I, the next slide? The mission what we have is try to bring all types of waste streams to a product what customers can sell, because in opinion of us, the most customers don't know that he can make money with all types of waste, what he have from farms or factories or something else. And especially what is the biggest profit from making waste is that the organic matter in the mineral, or together with the minerals, is the most important feeding for your plants. And the organic matter is normally something what is very difficult to find or to import for countries because it's real expensive. And that is the reason that it is the best way to produce this kind of things locally. And the best way, in opinion of Dorset, is always on farm site. Dus not transport your waste, what is wet and is leaking, smelting. Try to handle all the waste where you produce this. Then on the next slide, we are working with agents in South America, because from Holland is not possible to do your sales and especially the contact with your customers. That's the reason we have people for us working in Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico. And why is Mexico added to this list? Because the mentality of that people in Mexico fits very good to South America and not to the US. And that's the reason that we have done Mexico to this group of customers, because we have for every type of group of customers on different sales trajects and points what we will discuss with customers when we do sales. And that is the reason that we make some groups all over the world where countries are placed in. I have a little bit put of the historic from Dorset in South America. Dorset do this all real slowly. Have one reason. Dorset have to make always profit on each project what we are doing. We are a small company and we have not budgets to do developments or something else without a project. Means Dorset do always developments in projects together with customers. And the other reason is also I'm working only 2 days for sales for South America. The rest of the time I'm working as process engineer for projects in Europe, because that is not still the main business for us. Means I have only 20% of the time to do something and to spend on sales in South America. But I think we have done nice results after starting. And we are starting with an fair in Brazil to see or there maybe are possibilities to do something, because we have always the idea that we are too expensive for South America, but that is not true. The equipment that we are making is not too expensive. The biggest challenge is to find the customers who can pay these installations, and also the import tax. That is the biggest challenge that we have seen, and especially things that make installations expensive for customers. Now we have done the first installation in 2014 in Brazil. That was a poultry dryer. That is the reason that we come in countries normally always on a quickly way to start with the poultry business, because poultry manure is to dry real simple, because it is not so wet. You can use air from your chicken houses to dry your chicken manure. Means your additional cost for drying are real low, and makes this with all benefits quickly to a product that can make a good profit for the farmers. The second step where we come in countries is normally slush drying, and as last the pork manure handling. The reason is quite simple. Pork manure is real wet. That makes handling of pork manure real expensive, especially when you go to the big volumes. In 2016, we start also in Mexico. We start in Colombia. 2018, we start in Chile with a sales department. And especially in Chile, we see things go real quickly. And why it goes quickly? It is quite simple. On this way, the government is more pushing that companies have to do something on smell. And we see always that is a big help for us when government starts to push that customers have to do something on smell issues, and especially farmers. They are close to cities. They have from the government Chile a lot of pressure, and means in Chile goes sales this moment very well, because the companies are a little bit afraid for the penalties what governments are giving this moment. They are real high, and that's the reason that business in Chile goes this moment very well, because we see this is the only country this moment in South America that is pushing farmers to do something on smell. The next slide is what we have done in Colombia from 2017 until now. We have in 2016 done the first contacts. In 2017, we start to visit the country to see what kind of customers there are. We have done some shows. And 2018, we've done the same little bit, only we have done extra a roadshow. In 2019, we make the decision to start a post address. And that is one of the best things that we have done until now. And it's not only for Colombia, but especially for the complete area, because we see that now is coming in a lot of requests from all countries, and not only Colombia, where they are speaking Spanish. Means that the conclusion is quite simple. When you like to do business, you need people that are speaking very good Spanish, because that is something what makes things for customer easier. And 2020 until now, we have not done more visits, and all things are on real low level this moment, because without personal contacts with customers, we can not do any business, because I think in the business where we are working is part of to do business is trust from customers to us, and you can build up only your trust when you are visit customers on site and not with a video call or an email. That's the reason that we have all business from 2020 until now on a low level, and we hope middle of the year or next year we can go forwards with things where we are ended in 2019. Things that stands out is opening an email box. What I say, it brings a lot of more requests, all the most in Spanish. The price level of the installation is for us also a big issue, because in Europe is it common that you have a lot of additional things on a real high level. Everybody speaks about a SCADA system, air cleaning systems, a safety workplace suppliers. That are a lot of things. When you come for the first time, the customers find that not important, and they are looking only for the main machine. Means we have to think on a little bit different way when we comes to the new customers, and that we take the time to explain to other way of thinking in minds of Dorset, because it is not only the machine what is important, but also you have to think on your neighbors, and maybe also on your children. They have to later to go forwards in the business. The difference with Europe, the biggest difference, I think, especially the long sales time. You can have a lead and you think it goes quickly forwards, and then for what reason is it stopping? And maybe after 1 or maybe 3 years, it starts again the process. And for us, it's common that we, after 5 or 6 years, do the sales after the first contact. But after this, they expect a real short deliver time. That is something what you have to learn to handle. But the first times was that for Dorset a little bit for the production, a little bit in shock that the deliver times they're expecting, they are so short. Of course, when sales trajects takes long time, you have to spend more money for sales. Means when you like to sell it for the same prices in Europe, you must calculating with less profits on the total project. And the customer relation is real important. We have the feeling that a lot of customers find it real important that you visit them on site, but also that you take time for them, speak with them, and not give them the feeling that you have to do all things quickly and in a hurry. It takes the time to visit customers, take the time to respond to them emails, give them especially the feeling they are important, and altogether you comes to the more sales cost what I have in the point before. Something what I have note down is also important, and I think that was last year, especially in Brazil. The real goes from 3.4 up to 6.8 last 2 months. Forget your sales in that time. And we see now also in Brazil, business is complete coming to standing. And when the real is not changing, we're expecting to do no business at this moment in Brazil until this is changing.
Thank you, Hans. I think we, looking at the time, we have to continue to the next speaker. Maybe just to finish, because I think you have.
I have one slide and I'm finished.
perfect. Please go ahead.
Yeah, the challenge, especially for Dorset, is because Dorset do a little bit larger projects, find customers who can pay this, because we have seen that you have not to expect too much from local banks. So when you can do these projects not together with a customer that can pay this for his own money, you will see that it's real difficult to forward the project and explain the different kind of things of thinking. That is something what I explained before. And what is a little bit different from Europe is that managers changing real quickly from jobs. Means every time you see new people in front of you when you come for a meeting, that you have to start from front, explaining of your project and why the project is important for them and all things what belongs to the sales traject. Dus you see that you real often have to start from scratch with the same project. And not all salespeople can handle this. I have this seen in an organization of Dorset, but you know that this happens is something what you have to try to handle. Yeah, this is from my side, a little bit what we have done the last years and the experiments, what is coming out in South America. And I will thank for the time that is given me.
Thank you, Hans. I think a very clear presentation with a lot of experiences, learnings, recommendations, tips that you have mentioned in your presentation. I think that will be very useful for several of the companies that are starting to explore the Colombian market from this webinar onwards. So thank you for that, Hans. We will quickly continue with Jeroen Blom. Jeroen Blom is Business Development Coach at the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, RVO, responsible for Colombia and very familiar with the instruments and the programs RVO has to offer, which could benefit companies from the Netherlands interested in exploring the opportunities in Colombia. Jeroen, the floor is yours. And we will show
Thank you very much.
I think you're going to show the presentation yourself, correct?
That is correct. If you can just confirm if it's on the screen right now.
Yes, we can all see it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So first of all, happy to be here on behalf of the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. Let me see if this is all technically working like it should. Yes, there we go. So these are my details. Thank you, Willem, for the great introduction. Apart from being responsible for Colombia, I'm also working on regional business development for the entire Latin America region. So that means that if there is some overlap in what your company is looking for, please also feel free to reach out to me, because sometimes there are very interesting synergies, like already mentioned before, for example, between Mexico, but also Brazil or Argentina. So please feel free to reach out. I'll repeat these details also at the end of the presentation. A quick agenda, 2 words or maybe 2 lines on what RVO is actually doing, a bit on the corona pandemic, and then some relevant instruments that can hopefully help you to speed up or help you at least with the process to become active in Colombia. RVO is part of the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate. So obviously we're based in The Hague, in the Netherlands, and there are basically 4 important things that we're doing that we can help you with. It's about funding, networking, supplying you with know-how, and help you with compliance. And I will tell you a bit more on what we can do specifically on those 4 points. First, a bit on the corona pandemic. Basically, like everybody, of course, last year it was a big surprise for us. And we normally thrive by making people's connections, and we visit trade shows and we organize such like an event like this at our office, and then we can all engage and get that human interaction. We know hopefully it's going to be back soon. In the meantime, we had to completely reinvent ourselves, like many of you. What you can find on our website right now is a country and region FAQ on what's happening in that specific area happening in the pandemic. We've also decided to focus more on information. At the time we cannot travel or we cannot have those interesting networking events. Well, let's do, for example, studies and looking at opportunities. And obviously we're moving a lot of our activities online. That means also digital trade missions, online trade fairs, webinars. And importantly is that we've also extended some of the subsidies, of course, on behalf of the Netherlands government, and there are some new instruments. So that's then a small thing that we can do to help you get through this period. Let's zoom in on this one. The instruments, our programs, and the subsidies that we can offer on behalf of the Netherlands government. My personal favorite is the customized business partner support. Allow me to translate it to Dutch, zakenpartner support op maat. Why is it my favorite? Well, you can see it's a flexible service. So based on your profile and plans, we're going to connect you with one of our amazing team members in The Hague, and then we can specifically look for you what we can help you with. Is it about informing you about events? Could it be supplying you with some useful contacts? And then just a quick mention, that cannot be end consumers, but we do have a good database with agents, distributors, and also production partners. Obviously, we cannot do it alone. And yeah, that's very good that you get international economic network support. So that means that our embassies, which are now meeting, but for example, the Holland House, or in some other areas, the Netherlands business support offices, they will also participate in this. So yeah, and last but not least, you can see it's free. So reach out. This is a very great opportunity, I would say, to make use of. And it gives you basically your boots on the ground, because we work together with our partners in the countries itself. Then if you're like a bit earlier, let's say you're a bit earlier in your terms of internationalization strategy, please have a look online at the Starters in International Business Program, or well, it's called SIP or SIB. There's several what we call vouchers. So that means that we help you to hire, for example, a consultant, think with you about your strategy plan, look at a specific market entry. It could well be Colombia, but also when it's possible again, we can look at the participation in missions. And you can even get individual trade fair participation support. And last but not least, also fiscal or legal support. And yeah, we've seen from the earlier presentations that can be very handy, especially in Latin America, where this could be quite a challenge. Reach out, of course, if you would like to know more about this. The Kickstart voucher, that's also a very nice opportunity here. And you don't have to be like a starter. This is more meant to get you a kickstart after we can hopefully soon forget about the pandemic. And it means that we can help you find you a consultant and also supply you with a subsidy for it to get a renewed marketing plan, think of a new business model, or maybe work on an alternative supply chain if you've been hit by pandemic issues or others. Then, yeah, this is a tough one in English. So DHI, demonstratieprojecten, haalbaarheidsstudies en investeringsvoorbereidingsprojecten. This is basically a subsidy scheme where you can get support for your demonstration project. If you would like to demonstrate a technology or a product or service and prove in the local context that this could work. And I could well see this possible as well in the case of Manure valorization in Colombia. The same holds for feasibility studies and also investment preparation studies. Then we go on to the financing part. If you're looking really about financial support or loans, for example, or insurances, please have a look at the DGGF, which is the Dutch Good Growth Fund. This is a team of my organization with financial specialists that can help you with import, export, and investment financing. And basically, again, this is quite a complicated instrument, but we will also guide you to get your approval for this. So there will first be made a quick scan. So again, yeah, this could be a great opportunity on the financial side of your internationalization strategy. Trade shows, yeah, let's hope that this will return very soon. There's two options here. You could, for example, think of joining a Netherlands pavilion at one of the bigger strategic trade fairs worldwide. But there's also a second option, which you can see down below, which is called the SME or the MKB, Midden-Kleinbedrijf Lounge. And these are meant for groups of people with a minimum of 10 within the same sector, where you can get support from us to go to a new trade show or a not that well-known trade show, for example, and you want to check out if this could be a basis for further exploration in the country. So as soon as we can get back to travel, definitely have a look at this one too. Then we come to the last one I would like to mention to you, and this is considered the holy grail of public-private partnership, the so-called PIB, or if we call it locally in The Hague, PIP. This is very interesting because what we would like to do is to form a cluster of companies, and it can also include, for example, knowledge institutes, and together with the government, we go into the market together and on a very strategic way. You can see on the screen, this could be a subsidy up to 350,000 euros. So that's very interesting. And you can see all the implications it may have very positively. We can go to seminars, think of governmental connections, hire a local liaison. And you can also, under the flag of the Netherlands, explore further opportunities. And yeah, I think this very, very interesting, and eventually this is for me like an eventual end goal of a series of activities like this. It would be fantastic if we could manage to make that a bit more lively. Please have a look on what is called the Quita Porcino. It's an example from Argentina, and yeah, you can check it out on the website, and you can see exactly what this cluster of Dutch companies has done. And the most important thing here, very interesting, is that they cover almost the entire chain within the porcino, within the pig chain, and that's very interesting. So then we go in as a country, yeah, and it goes from the first start till the end of the chain. And yeah, that's amazing if we can help each other and collaborate. That was quite some information in a relatively short time. So I can definitely understand if you'd like to know more. Here are my details again. I can also put these in the chat, or any one of my colleagues like Jan Willem or the team at the embassy can also connect you. And please check out our website in case there's further questions. I hope this has been yeah, quick and concise, Jan Willem, and then we can proceed, I think, to you with some next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeroen. I think indeed very clear and concise. So thank you for that. I think also for the persons that have joined, we're going to share you all the presentations. So the presentation of the study, the presentation that Jeroen just gave on RVO instruments for the people that would like to take a detailed look, and also the presentation of Hans, if he would allow us with his tips and tricks. And besides the presentation, we are also going to share with the persons that have joined as a little also incentive. We're going to share you the complete study, because the presentation that Andres and Juan Diego gave was just a summary of the bigger study. We're going to share you the complete document for you to take a further look to analyze your opportunities in more detail. Looking at the time, it's 9:30. I'm going to ask for the person that can stay a little bit longer, 10 to more or less 10 more minutes. I want to address some questions to our speakers, and then I want to quickly present together with the embassy team the next step that we have thought might be valuable for the companies that have joined today. But first, let's take a look at some questions. I've selected two to begin with. I think the correct persons, or probably the persons to answer these questions, will be Andres and Juan Diego. So the first question would be, what is the main business case for Colombian farmers to implement biogas installations? Is it energy production? Is it production of fertilizer? Or is it environmental licenses to be able to operate? What would be the main business case you feel? What would be the answer to this question, Juan Diego or Andres?
Yes, thank you, Jan Willem, and thank you for the question. Well, personally, I think that depends on many factors, like distance, volumes of manure, infrastructure, but also the cost of the technology that you have to offer. During the presentation, we made more emphasis on the opportunities for fertilizers and biogas production, because we perceived that the Colombian Ministry of Environment has a high interest in these two, and we think that helps making things easier, especially in relation to the environmental licenses. So that's why we think that maybe those two would be more interesting to explore.
Perfect for your clear answer. Thank you, Andres. Well, we have several companies also, and that's something that present their company, which I will enter into more detail in a bit. The second more technical question would be, what are current constraints? Why organic manure is underused as a fertilizer? Is it technical, culture, price, distance, application technique, storage? What would be the main constraint in your opinion, Andres or Juan Diego? And thank you to Wim Houwers, very well known to us, for this specific question.
Yes, well, I think you named them all.
Exactly, I was going to say the same.
Yeah, it's mainly a cultural thing. We got information from the research we did that people here don't know how to apply technologies to produce fertilizers out of manure. So that's a big constraint. And well, what they usually do is just treat it as a waste stream. So they just dispose it in the rivers or the soil. So there's no treatment for it. So I think all of them are the current constraints, as you will mention, Wim.
Thank you. I think that's a very complete answer. Juan Diego, from your side, anything to add to answer to Andres' reply?
No, I agree. I was going to say exactly the same that Andres said. I mean, as we discovered in our research, they are not only disposed as manure, in rivers or in other fields, but also the big companies, like for instance, we have Alcotec, the Colombian Dutch companies we talk about. They are giving the manure away to small or medium farmers for the crops, but they're kind of educating people how to use it as an organic fertilizer, but there's not like an education in Colombian mentality of manure being used as a fertilizer. So they are still stick to the chemical fertilizers, which are also having like a big commerce here in the country. So many reasons why the organic fertilizers are not used here in Colombia.
Yes, and of course there's a need for a license with the Colombian Agricultural Institute, ICA, which sometimes it's not easy to get in the country. So that's an additional constraint that we also found.
Thank you. And looking at, you mentioned at several points in your presentation, Andres and Juan Diego, you mentioned the pilots by the Ministry of Environment in Colombia. What is the status of those pilots or projects at this moment? Is there concrete actions being taken that could be of interest for Dutch companies?
No, they're just, we are actually motivating Dutch companies to contact us and have interviews with the Ministry of Environment, for example, in order to propose them models for these pilot projects, because there are actually not steps forward in what they're looking for. I mean, they're having a lot of discussions with other entities in the government, but they actually haven't taken any step forwards into this pilot project. So we actually invite Dutch companies and other channels to have interviews or to talk with the Ministry of Environment to propose models or to propose projects which make them advance in this topic, but not yet.
Yes, and of course, an additional limitation, it's the budget the ministry has.
True.
So that's something that hampers the realization of these pilots.
Thank you. I have two follow-up questions based on your replies, two more persons with follow-up questions. The first one, what about license by ICA? What does it mean? You mentioned the licenses, Andres. What does it mean in practice?
They need to get a license for commercializing fertilizers. So they need to follow a process. It takes time and it costs money. So farmers, sometimes they don't have the volume enough to make a business case out of the processing of manure they are currently doing, then they have no incentive to get these licenses. And in practice, what they do is selling informally.
Thank you. And then the last question for both of you, and then I will have one more question for Jeroen that also involves Hans. What about the local climate throughout the year and the energy required to keep the pigs healthy temperature in the housing. How is the local climate, and how is that of influence?
Well, that's a good question. I think that currently there are no problems in relation to climate control, especially in Antioquia with the pork sector. But we have seen that in the case of Hocotec, this Dutch Colombian company, they are working now with biogas to control climate at their farms. So I think there are opportunities also there, but that depends also on the region we are talking about, because it can be more tropical or it can be more on the uphills. So the climate varies depending on the region where you grow these, rear these pigs, or in the poultry sector.
Thank you, Andres. Thank you, Juan Diego, once again for your clear answers. Then going back one moment to Jeroen, I also saw a question. I think you mentioned quite some programs and instruments, but there's of course a lot more, and RVO has a lot of beautiful names. There's also one called P4G. What can you tell us about that? Is that something that would be applicable here, or maybe I don't know if you can answer this question, or we could ask Patricia or Andres, for example.
What I know from it, we have a specialist for this. So if there's any actual further knowledge required, I'll ask my colleague, which is Lovina Bruns. But partnering for green growth is an instrument where you need to tie in your goals with the Sustainable Development Goals. And Colombia is part of this program. So it could be an opportunity to explore further. But we will need to go into further detail with an expert on this program. Or any of my colleagues like Patricia could add something on this. That could also be an option.
Yeah, thank you. To be honest, I don't think it's the most easy instrument, P4G. I think it's quite complex, quite difficult. So if there are other possibilities, I would like even a PIP or a pre-PIP or a cluster, impact cluster. I think it would be better to explore those first than P4G, which I think it's quite complicated.
Thank you, Patricia. And I think, well, there's also a suggestion regarding PIB that it could be a very good way forward. Also a lot of interest to work together with you, Hans. I think many of the Dutch companies interested in this specific sector in Colombia, the rest of the region, could be complementary. So I think that's also something, there's quite some comments about that, about Dutch companies that got inspired by your story and would very much like to work together. So hopefully for Dorset, that's also a possibility to work together with other Dutch companies. Have you done that in these countries, Hans? Work together with other Dutch companies?
Yes, we are starting now up a project together with Nijenhuis in Chile, especially for handling of waste of fish production. And of course, we are working in Brazil together with another Dutch company that tries to do the import for us, because especially in Brazil is import very difficult, and we try to find some side ways so that we can reduce the import tax.
Perfect, thank you very much. And I think this is also, I think, an answer very much in line with our ideas, because this is a webinar to inform mainly the Dutch companies on the study we have conducted about the conclusions. But of course, in the end, what we want to achieve is position new Dutch companies, knowledge institutions within Colombia. So we think we should go step by that. We should try to, because one of the challenges, of course, is lack of knowledge on both sides. So maybe in Colombia to use manure in other ways than currently is being done, but also to make Dutch companies aware of the possibilities that exist in Colombia. And I think also something we have noticed is that for many stakeholders in Colombia, so for the associations, but also for the private companies within the pork and the pig, within the pork and poultry sector, they are not very familiar with the Dutch offering. So they might not know solutions that we have to offer that could benefit them. So actually also that's a challenge, because we have to position ourselves, we have to show also to the Colombian stakeholders the possibilities and the offering of Dutch companies. So that's actually the next step, that together with Patricia de Vries and her team, we have thought that a good next step of this event today would be to organize a next session, also online, but aimed at the Colombian target groups. So aimed at the association, the associations for Colombia, FENAVI, the Ministry of Environment, but also the bigger companies within the pork and the poultry sector, to invite them to what we call a showcase. So we are thinking to give a number of Dutch companies that would have to offer solutions that would fit the opportunities we have described to the Colombian stakeholders. So I've seen in the chats that several of the Dutch companies that have joined, from Nijhuis, of course, Dorset that presented today, but also Holland Door. I saw also Misset. So several Dutch organizations that also indicate that they want to take next steps. So the next step we are thinking of would be to organize an online session in which a limited number of Dutch companies can actually present their solutions and how they would fit the Colombian sector to them. So that's the next step we are proposing. We're going to analyze well all the companies that participated today to see how we can create a showcase that would be effective, that would be also complementary. We want to present ourselves also with a complete and integral offering as much as possible. So I think for the companies that have joined today, one of the incentives is also that we want to make you part of the next steps. I don't know, Patricia, from your side, did I describe it well? Do you want to add something to the way I described it?
No, I thank you, Jan-Willem. I think you described it very well. I think what we want to, the next step we want to do is present our solutions to the Colombian challenges of today in meetings with different important stakeholders. So that's the poultry industry, the pig industry, but also the relevant ministries. And I think, well, I'm looking very much forward to prepare those sessions together with Dutch companies in order to match the requirements as good as possible with our offer. That will take some time and some preparation, but I think it would be an excellent next step. So thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. So for all the companies that have joined today, of course, we have the inscriptions, the registration, so we will analyze carefully. But if you want to be proactive, please already share us your company profile, the solutions you offer for the specific challenges we presented today. And then we will try to build a showcase, an online session in which we will inform the Colombian parties. You will receive today, tomorrow, all the all the presentations, the complete study with all details. Please study if there's any additional questions or things that you would like to comment personally with Juan Diego or Andres. That's very much possible. Please contact us. Please tell us more about your companies, about your solutions. And then we will start to prepare the next step, which will be the presentation of the Dutch companies to the Colombian challenges. I think looking at the time, I should not extend myself anymore. I want to thank Patricia, Andres, Juan Diego, Jeroen, and Hans for your great presentations. For the people in the Netherlands, I wish you a very pleasant evening. For the people joining from Latin America, have a good day. We are only starting our day. And please be proactive. Please inform us about your company solutions, because this was a starting point today. And we want to make you part of the next steps. So thank you once again to all, and see you soon.
Thank you all. Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.